Well, good morning, everybody. I am Senior Meteorologist Chris Walmsley with America's Weather Streaming Channel. Wanted to give you an update on the storm briefing for the Mid-Atlantic Northeast for the weekend heavy rain threat. I'll also talk about severe weather threat in the plains and then eyes on another possible tropical system in the coming weeks. So currently it is Wednesday, September 20th, 7 a.m. So what are we expecting this weekend? Well, we're going to have a low pressure system develop off the southeast coast. As it moves northward into the mid-Atlantic region, depending on when it makes landfall, it could have some tropical characteristics, but the bottom line is the threat will be the same no matter what. We're looking for potential of 3 to 6 inches of rain in some areas, especially North Carolina, Virginia, and northward into Massachusetts. We also have a threat for high rip currents and also coastal flooding during high tide cycles. So on the left-hand side is model data of the rainfall that we are predicting. And generally, this is lower than what we saw before on one of the models yesterday, but that's okay. Because generally I look for the actual swath of rainfall and then I can interpret how much rainfall could occur depending on when it actually makes landfall and how much moisture comes with it. But generally we're looking at, in the red, a swath of close to 3 inches on average. And I'm anticipating upwards of 6 inches in some spots. You can notice that Chesapeake Bay region, for some reason, has a lot of rainfall there and offshore of the Carolinas Outer Banks. But the closer you are to the coast, the heavier the rainfall. That's how I'm predicting it. And you're looking at upwards of 3 to 6 inches of rain, okay? And already the Weather Prediction Center for Friday into Saturday morning has a slight brisk out for the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, Saturday into Sunday, they'll probably do the same thing over the northern Mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast. But they usually wait till the 2 days, 3 days out before they actually add slight risk to the marginal. But if anything, it's something that we already anticipate will occur, okay? So this is Friday morning with the 500 anomalies. You can see the huge ridge over the Canada region. And then we have a storm system coming into the western part of the U.S., while the southeast coast low will develop Friday morning, okay? And we also have a nice disturbance off the west coast and a nice huge ridge further into the Pacific. And I'll get into the potential of a tropical system later on. But what I really want to talk about is, with this being so strong and this being so strong, in between that, you're going to get severe weather. So I'm anticipating the plains to see some type of severe weather, probably damaging winds and large hail, possibly reaching into the Midwest. And this low pressure system off the southeast coast, I'll show it in motion. That'll actually push up the Atlantic seaboard. Here it goes, going up the Atlantic seaboard, okay? Look at this sucker. That is a huge anomaly, and so is this one developing off the west coast. That really is painting a picture in my mind. Plus, we also have this ridge of high pressure just being stagnant over the Atlantic, which will allow a tropical system that currently is developing possibly into a depression by later today or tonight off the African coast. But there is nothing to stop it from actually moving this way to the west and possibly get into the Gulf of Mexico, okay? Yesterday, they kind of wanted to steer it over Cuba and northward, but the way things are going on, I can anticipate that there is more potential of a system moving into the Gulf of Mexico next week, and I'll kind of show that. So initially, I just wanted to talk about the southeast coast into the Mid-Atlantic region, and with the onshore winds, the coastal flooding that may occur during high tides and the highest winds. It's always in the right quadrant of a system, whether or not it's a nor'easter, low pressure system, or a hurricane. The strongest winds are going to be in the right quadrant. Okay, so depending on where this system actually moves into the Carolinas, will paint a picture of where the heaviest winds are going to be. Okay, this is Hurricane Lisa from a while ago. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea that as it turns, this is the highest wind threat, and the offshore winds will actually push out the water along the coastal sections. So during high tide, you'll have significant wave action, whereas on this end, you'll actually have low end action, okay, with the waves. So let's go into what we're going to have for the severe weather into the tropics. And I kind of wanted to show you the upper level and notice what's coming on here, okay? Take this with a grain of salt. This would be Ophelia, okay? This is what's coming off of Africa. And if you notice up here, here's your ridge and your trough of low pressure that is significant off the west coast. As we see this come into the west coast, this could be a steering mechanism for Ophelia to actually turn to the north, okay? And the timing of this is imperative for Ophelia, number one, to either hit the Yucatan Peninsula or actually push into the Gulf of Mexico and threaten parts of the Gulf Coast. This will be worked on over the next week, okay? So don't get too shocked by having me show this to you. But I did want to show that there is nothing out here that is steering anything from Ophelia just moving to the west until this big ridge, this trough actually, the ridge over the Alaskan coastline, and then the trough that actually comes into the west coast, that will actually help steer Ophelia, okay? So we'll see what happens over the next coming days and into early next week before we get anywhere close to specifics on where it's going to make landfall, if it does, okay? But it is looking promising that there is something that will develop and actually could make impact to U.S. interests. So I also wanted to look at the Pacific, and here is Japan, okay? And then here is your ridge that I've been telling you about that actually is going to push into number one position. And here is your trough that's going to hit into number two position. So as long as this is extremely strong as it's showing, that ridge will actually build significantly into the west coast. That will be your steering mechanism for Ophelia, okay? So I always look way out 7 days and see what's going on over Japan and parts of western sections of Alaska before I even think about what's going on over the Atlantic, because whatever is going on here is going to be the steering mechanism for anything that goes on over the west coast, let alone the east coast. So let's go a little bit further, and you'll notice here is your ridge that actually disappears, but by that time you have a significant trough that develops over the west coast. I'm anticipating that this ridge will still be strong. I don't know why it's weakening on the model data, but That's why I call it silly once we get out beyond 10 days. So that actually will probably still be rather strong by the time that we get to 10 days and beyond, which this ridge will definitely be just as strong and not weaken as it's showing. Notice how there's a strong ridge in red over the East Coast. So all you have is this high pressure system later on that is just going to steer Ophelia into potentially moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, and where it goes from there, we'll find out over the next week. But anybody in the Gulf Coast region, just keep an eye on what's going on in the news, and I'll continue to update, or my teammates will, as far as where and when and if Ophelia actually makes landfall over the U.S. interests. Okay? So, in summary, the main thing is the southeast coast low putting moderate to heavy rainfall along the eastern seaboard this weekend. 3 to 6 inches of rain is possible. There could be upwards of higher than that, and the further inland you go, you could see less. Okay? And then eyes will be on the Atlantic. You'll hear it on every single news agency coming up. Some will scare you to death. I'm not going to do that. I'm just showing you the potential of what's going to happen. It's way too early to predict it, but again, it will be named Ophelia when it does develop in the Western Atlantic, or Eastern Atlantic, I'm sorry, off the coast of Africa, and it'll take a long time before it even gets to U.S. interests. So my next update will be Friday, or as needed. I'm anticipating Friday, though. You could email me at chris@americasweathersc.com. I always love your emails. I always write back to you. Some we have a nice conversation going. But again, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to help out in any way possible and have you understand what is occurring without scaring you, but give you an idea of what may occur. Okay? Well, thank you again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.